Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ellie, and I am the Creative Practice Coordinator for Rising Arts Agency. And today we are talking about unions and the roles that unions can play, both kind of in organising for workers' rights, but also in a context for things like housing rights. We've got two amazing representatives from two unions today who will be joining in the conversation about the roles of unions and how we can all be organising for kind of individual and collective rights. So a bit of an introduction. My name is Ellie. For those of you who don't know what Rising Arts Agency does, we are a primarily Bristol and Southwest based creative agency, and we work with young people aged 16 to 30 with a little bit of leeway at either end, using kind of creativity and the arts to mobilise ourselves and others for greater economic, social and cultural reform, justice, social change. So using creativity with a kind of a political goal in mind. So at the moment we are in the middle of our second year of Whose Future, which is our citywide billboard campaign, where we platform the work of young artists and young creatives alongside statements and provocations and demands of and to the city, with the idea of taking up as much space as we can, replacing advertising with art, and making or increasing the visibility and the profile of the young people in Rising's creative community. And this year's theme is Care and Wellbeing, but under the umbrella that it's not like green tea and like I'm gonna have a lovely bath and like, ooh, I'm gonna put on a face mask and relax, but actually like what does care and wellbeing mean under like capitalism and under systemic injustice, and how can we live well within these systems, and how can we begin to mobilize and organize to dismantle those systems so that we can live better, and not instead be like tethered to the yoke of grind culture and burnout and all of that kinds of things. So ramble from me, but first I'd like to hand over to Anna to introduce yourself and the union that you're here to represent.
Hi everyone. So thanks for inviting us. I'm Anna. So I am going to speak on behalf of designers and cultural workers, which is a branch of United Voices of the World, UVW. In the branch designers and cultural workers, my elected role is casework coordinator. Sounds a bit boring, but it's not. And otherwise, in my work life, I'm a freelancer, and I mostly do textiles. And then on the weekends, I also do work in a cinema, like as front of house. So as you'll see, like in the unions, it's very worker-led. So we're not like professional. I won't be able to speak too professionally about things, but yeah. Is that it for now?
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's also the exact energy that Rising operates as, which is like we're doing professional level work and we are achieving things that are as effective as somebody who might have double, triple the amount of experience or kind of professional experience. But we're not gonna change the way that we communicate or act or hold ourselves in order to fit into something that ultimately like we think is kind of bullshit anyway, because like you don't need to be dressed a certain way or to act a certain way or be a certain type of person in order to know what the fuck you're talking about. So that's the energy we're holding today in this space. So Louis, can I hand over to you to introduce yourself?
Yes, you can hand over to me to introduce myself. So I'm Louis. I am a member of ACORN Bristol. ACORN is a community union. So kind of we operate very similarly to trade unions, but rather than organising people in a specific workplace or a specific industry, we organise people in communities. So we started in Bristol in 2014, and we'll do a bit more of the history of it later, but we're now operating kind of all across the country, and we've got, I think, about 30 branches in different towns and cities. And very similar to, you know, UVW in terms of the fact that we are made up of like ordinary working class people, and we represent low and middle income families, and we try to bring them together so that we can have more political power over those decision makers that currently have way too much control over the way that our lives are led.
Amazing, thank you so much. Yes, so this is very much a kind of both like a crash course and an open conversation about the role that unions play, and using kind of your two unions as sort of specific case studies, but also as doorways into something that I think not a lot of young people, particularly young creatives and young freelancers, have had much contact with and much engagement with, because there's not necessarily the same kind of entrenched habit and tradition of unionization in the kind of the arts and the creative industries. There obviously is some tradition of it, but not as much as in other industries. So I was just wondering if I could put the question to the two of you, that from your experience of being in it, and your unions are different in many different ways, but kind of what a union is to you, and what the power of the union is in your kind of individual contexts. I wonder if I can come to you first, Anna.
Yes. So a union, also I want to say, I started organizing or being more active in my trade union like 2 years ago. Before that, I had no union experience, and it wasn't something that was spoken of in my industry. So yeah, I really relate to that. And this is why our branch also was born. So yes, from the beginning, a trade union is so basically it's a group of workers that come together and that fight together for better working conditions. And there are more like traditional forms it can take, where you have to go through certain protocols, and you have to elect one representative to kind of bargain on behalf of all the workers to your employers. But generally it's like what we, at least the way we do it in UVW, is that it's not, it's basically just workers coming together. You don't have to follow too much of the protocol, and it still works. I guess the only thing that's important is to create solidarity, communicate with your colleagues, and try and fight for something that's for everyone's best interest, even if you don't have all the same ideas about everything. You probably all want London living wage if you live in London. Maybe I'll just say quickly a little bit about UVW. Is that helpful? So
yeah,
UVW is a member-led campaigning trade union which supports and empowers precarious, low-paid, and predominantly migrant workers in the UK. So it used to be London-centric, but now not so anymore. Because it's migrant-centered and very Latinx migrant-centered, the meetings and events are run in both English and Spanish. And the union focuses on precarious workers in the gig economy and other undervalued, neglected, and unorganized sectors. And maybe you'll hear the word organized a lot, and I don't know if I'm using lingo that's doesn't, but it just means, I guess, organizing means I guess coming together and doing the work to fight for, yes. So UVW is known for kind of supporting and being composed of workers that usually are left out of traditional union organizing, workers that are migrants and that have precarious jobs. It's also, I would say UVW is known to be a radical union, so it's anti-racist, anti-capitalist, and it focuses on direct action techniques. So even if let's say the union isn't recognized in the workplace, they'll still do actions. Some of the amazing wins that have happened in the last year is, for example, bringing outsourced cleaners and catering staff from hospitals and bringing them as NHS staff. So challenging outsourcing, and actually at St. George's Uni, the first group of Black and Brown workers have challenged outsourcing in UK courts as institutional racism. And then also during COVID-19, a lot of workers have done walkouts. So when they felt unsafe, they've used a section of employment law called Section 44, and they've walked out and demanded safer workplaces. Okay, if I'm rambling, should I focus on designers and cultural workers, or?
Yeah, if you'd like to speak to that element, that would be great.
Yeah, so in UVW, there's many branches. So you have legal sector workers, so people working in the legal sector. There's also architectural workers, sex workers, childcare, cleaners, and service sector. People working in domestic abuse sector, so a lot of charity workers as well. I don't want to forget anyone, but probably I'm forgetting. So I think what happened is that this group of graphic designers, they had a group called Evening Class, and they started speaking about what trade unions could be helpful for graphic designers. They started, some of them were already members of UVW, because you could be a member without having a job that fits into any sector. Whereas with traditional unions, you might have to fit into strict categories. So any type of work, you can be a member, and you'll be represented by the employment lawyers and tribunal. So anyways, graphic designers did some research into artists' union and into the history of creative unions in the UK, and they decided that it would benefit from UVW's kind of techniques and like agile structure that's a bit more like, I guess, reactive to the new landscape, shitty landscape of employment. And that also we can learn from our like sibling branches with who we share common struggles, like for example things around worker status. So a lot of us struggle with this, of being perpetually freelance and self-employed when we should be employed. So we benefit from learning from, for example, the sex workers that have won worker status, which was a big win. What else can I tell you? I feel like I've been going on for a while. Maybe Louis.
I can hand over to Louis, and then if you think of something else, we can come back to you.
Yes.
Lovely. Yeah, Louis, you spoke about how ACORN is kind of a community union, which is different from a trade union. So from ACORN's perspective, and from your perspective, kind of what is a union, what functions does it play, and how is it used?
So I think, I mean, from my perspective, and I suppose really from ACORN's perspective in some ways as well, you know, a union is there to try and redress the balance of power that exists between powerful individuals and the communities or the people who they hold power over. Kind of one of the things that we'll kind of talk about with our members, and that's part of like our political education, is this idea that there is kind of two types of power in the world. There is organized money, which is generally what we're talking about. It's like single individuals, business owners, the elite rich, and then there are organized people. And the way that we're able to redress those balances of power is by creating organized people, by bringing us together. So like I said, we're a community union, which is different to a workers union in some kind of quite obvious ways, right? So like the big one being that for workers unions, like there's always like a employer, there's a boss, there's someone who's quite the obvious person who you are going to be organizing people to have power over. In communities, those bosses are a little bit more all over the place. Kind of in communities, there are probably several quite powerful individuals. So there'll be the local councillors, there might be the local MP. In Bristol, there might be the mayor that holds power over communities. There's also going to be business owners. And ACORN particularly came together organising around landlords. When we first started door knocking in Easton, in Bristol, where we started in 2014, we didn't know what issue we wanted to organise around. We were going door to door in communities, knocking on people's doors saying, hey, we're wanting to build a community union, we want to get more power for normal people in this area, like what issues are affecting you? And the thing that just kept on coming up over and over and over again was housing. It's not really a surprise, you know, in Easton when we started, I think it had the highest amount of private renters of anywhere else in Bristol. It was about 60% of the housing stock was owned by landlords, and they control quite a lot of your lives, right? Exorbitant rents, terrible conditions, and all the rest of it. And it's, you know, if you try and complain as an individual about these practices, it is really, really, really easy to get brushed off. You get brushed off in various ways. They might just say, oh yeah, you're upset about this. Well, don't worry, we've got a complaints procedure for that. And they'll shove you down this long bureaucracy that is purposefully designed to not work, or to at least not cause any disruption to the people who created that bureaucracy. And for us as a union, what we're able to do is bring people together so that we can bypass that bureaucracy and create other forms of pressure that are much more likely to work. So for instance, you know, we might knock on your door, you might tell us about your landlord who's like, you know, not fixing your house properly. We'll note that down, talk to you about, do you know anybody else who, you know, is suffering from the same thing? Maybe they've got the same landlord, maybe they've got the same estate agent. And then we might, through our door knocking, through our community links, find several people who've got the same estate agent, who've got the same problem. And then rather than each of these individual people sending a letter or making a phone call and getting fobbed off, we'll take them down to the estate agent offices with a load of other people in the community who are upset about housing, and we'll demonstrate outside that estate agents until they meet with us, until they accept our demands. So that's kind of like what we're about, I suppose. It's like direct action by bringing people together. And for me, the successes of that come by, like I said, bypassing the systems that are created by powerful that they force us to engage with. And that kind of resonated me with what the UVW do as well in that same way. You know, I think there was some terminology used about not being a recognised union, and that means that they can just say, oh, well, you're not recognised, we actually don't need to listen to you. But actually, if you can disrupt their business, if you can get a media story about them and things that they're doing and the rest of it, if you can cause like financial pressure and financial harm to businesses, then they absolutely are forced to listen to you. And so that's kind of what ACORN's about. As we've grown, you know, like the scale of the work we've been able to take on has grown as well. I think one of the really important things for us has not just been about like sticking a flag in the ground saying like, we believe this, we want this to happen. We've only wanted to take on campaigns where we know we can get a win for the people who we're running those campaigns like with. There's no point in just kicking off about something if you're not going to be able to actually get a win on it. So, you know, when we first started, it might have been individual landlords, individual estate agents, but more recently we've had like huge national successes. So kind of, you know, a couple of years ago, we got our first big national win where we forced a number of banks to remove a clause in their mortgage lenders, which was stopping them from, if you got a buy-to-let mortgage as a landlord from TSB Bank, it came with a clause saying that you were not allowed to let that property to somebody in receipt of benefits, which was horrific, right? But that actually meant that a huge number of people on benefits across the whole country were not able to access housing. So we had, I think on the day, I can't remember exactly how large we were at the time, but we had maybe 15 different branches that all occupied a local branch of their TSB. And we refused to leave that branch for a number of hours and said, you know, this is the reason we're here today. And if you don't remove this clause, we're going to be back next Saturday. We're going to do exactly the same thing. And it took them 5 days to remove that clause from their buy-to-let mortgages, which is huge. And, you know, as we kind of get bigger, they're the types of things that we're able to do. So we're now at 30 branches up and down the country. I think we're at about, I've got it in my notes somewhere, 6,500 members. And we've doubled in size every year for the last 3 years. So we're really kind of like, we're really kind of growing. We don't just do housing. Like I said, we're member led. It's democratically led by members. So kind of a couple of stuff that we've done that has been like non-housing related. In Manchester, they managed to win a campaign to get local buses brought back under public control, which I think is like amazing. In Sheffield, one of my favourite actions the group in Sheffield did, they had a problem with bin collections and bins not being picked up properly by the council after some local cuts. So local members went and picked up all the bins themselves and dumped them at the council offices responsible for bin collection, and they now get more regular bin collections, which is like a bit of a classic organising tactic and like really nice.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think it's one of those things that feels very powerful, that the kind of organising against an issue that everybody experiences, but in that kind of fragmented and isolated way. Like you say, oh, everyone's kind of got a shitty landlord, which I feel like is something that, I mean, in Bristol, there's obviously a lot of conversations about that at the moment, because particularly at the moment, the state of housing and renting in Bristol is absolutely ridiculous and completely pitched against renters. But yeah, it seems so simple that like, if you can bring those people together, then that's loads of people, because everybody kind of is on that same battle. And like you were saying, Anna, the kind of the London living wage, like there often is a thing that you can unite people around. Yeah, that's so exciting. Both of you speak to quite a lot to like kind of agility and I guess newness and a kind of a different way of doing things, whether that's through direct action that feels quite different to the kind of the myth of the trade union. And I wonder like what your experiences are of being sort of new and different, and what you found the kind of the pros and cons of that is of being unions that have sort of sprung up in the last sort of 10 years or so, that don't maybe necessarily do things in the way that people expect unions to do things. I don't know if either of you have anything to say on that.
Yeah, maybe I can speak for the fact, for example, I guess I don't want to say it's totally new, because there's a history of it and people have been doing it for a long time, but maybe these structures are newer, or they are different from, I guess, bigger trade unions. Because at least we strive to function more on a mutual aid or solidarity, not charity kind of ideal, because we've realized that we don't know our rights, and we don't know how to create these networks really, and that actually it's like I guess what Louis was saying about you think you can't do anything, you're powerless, but actually you are, and so I guess that's a big pro, is that by being more member-led or more, I guess, less red tape or less service style, it's more sustainable, because we're like shifting all our ways of being, where we empower each other, we learn, we skill share, and I don't know, I feel like once you've done that work, I'm not saying you'll never ever be exploited again, that's not true, but I feel it helps shift much more. I think there's lots of challenges, because sometimes we do feel tiny in the face of big corporations and workplaces, and so I would say that's a challenge. Also, the big challenge in the creative industries is there's not really a culture of this kind of things, because the kind of dominant culture is more, I guess, individualized competition, like it's because of how the work because of how work has been shaped, there's I guess, yeah, there's the understanding that, let's say you're pitted against each other because there's so little jobs, and you have to like stay late, you have to work for free, kind of until you get picked. So you don't want to kick a fuss. And when you're picked, you feel privileged, and you feel lucky. You also feel like in creative industries, there's this whole like narrative of you do what you love. So you're not going to start politicizing it. You're not going to see yourself as a worker. And this is how like they've like, I guess capitalism has really been successful, is in that sense, because they've completely removed all like sense of like regulation or structure to see yourself as a worker. But what I find really interesting is to re-inject like this thought into our jobs, and to actually understand that people in the past, workers in the past have fought for 8-hour days and have fought for sick pay. And it's not a luxury, it's not uncool to put boundaries and to have security. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. Louis, I was wondering if you had anything to add on that.
I mean, Anna covered a lot of it, really. I don't want to echo, too much. I mean, I think, similarly, it's worth saying, although ACORN started in the UK in 2014, like ACORN actually started in the United States in the 60s. And, a lot of the methodology that we're using is kind of like directly copied from people who were doing this exact same work, then. I think here in the UK, kind of one of the spaces we're able to operate in that works is kind of linked to the fact that, generally speaking, trade union involvement has been on a massive decline recently. And also one of the things that's linked to that is that trade unions and communities used to be much stronger linked. When you had a factory in the middle of a town, and then naturally all of the workers would live near there, and so actually they lived in the same community, and actually their union did some community activity as well, and trade unions and communities were not totally linked. Now we've got this hugely disparate workforce, people are spread out across the whole city, and actually that link between communities and unions has for the most part disappeared. And so for ACORN, kind of stepping into that space, the community union, we are, like I said, really like revitalizing an old idea and just bringing something new to it. I think similarly, like to Anna, one of the things that's key with ACORN is that same thing of trying to use our work as a politicizing force for people who we come into contact with. Like one of the things that, upsets me is like the myth of the good landlord, for instance, when we're talking about housing, and we knock on someone's door and you'll talk to them about their housing and they might actually think that their landlord's okay. Oh, he's all right. My boiler broke, but it only took like 2 weeks for him to fix it. He's okay. And, I suppose it's all right. Yeah, I give them, 40% of my like take home pay every single month, but they're okay. They send me a Christmas card. They're a nice guy. And it's like part of like our work as ACORN is like agitating around that space and like pushing people to actually recognize that actually that's really messed up. And that like it doesn't need to be that way, that it shouldn't have been that way, and like using examples from the past of how things used to be. Like my favorite question ever to ask people on the doorstep when they say something like that is like, oh, do you think the landlord's house looks like this? Do you think they take 3 weeks to fix their own boiler? How would you like to have 40% of their income? Be pretty sweet, right? And then all of a sudden people start to think about some of those differences maybe, right? And actually the fact that actually maybe where they're sitting maybe isn't such a comfortable space. I think like as an organizer, which like I said, I mean, I'm a member of ACORN, like I'm not staff or anything, but I still treat myself as an organizer. And that like agitation is like really, really, really key to what we do. I think kind of I once said, I forget who this is from, I'm robbing this from someone, I hope I'm not butchering the quote, but like it says that like an organizer's job is to rub sore the wounds of discontent. And that's just a little bit of being like, actually, are you sure you're not a little bit more upset about that? because it's like from that anger that we create action, and that's what brings people together in a way that can get them to come and do some cool stuff with us and to start fighting for things. You know, it says on our t-shirt, I think really like taking what's ours. And I think that's like a key with ACORN as well. Like, we're not demanding something that isn't rightfully ours. Like, all of these things should belong to the commons, things that we need in order for us to simply live our lives. Food, housing, shelter, education, all of this stuff is ours by right. And like, we're not demanding anything that is in any way extraordinary. We're just demanding some real basics, you know.
I think that's it's a really interesting point about like when you come up against somebody who asks really good questions and you're like, oh, well, the narrative that I'm living is that everything is actually fine, and like I'm really knackered all the time and I work 6 jobs, but like, hey, I'm having a great time, it's fine. And then someone goes, are you fine? Are you? And you're like, don't open the door, please don't open the door, because it's just a huge mess back there. And it's so much, and it's that thing, right? It is rubbing the wound of going like, yeah, maybe it is fine, but like, couldn't everything be better? Like, dream bigger, the world could be better than this. And I think it's, like you say, it's both that that making things hurt so that you care about them, but also doing it with like a love that's like, you know, you deserve more than this. You deserve a house that doesn't have a hole in the roof, and you deserve a job that pays you so that you can like feel calm and relaxed, and not like, oh God, if I miss the shift tomorrow, then I'm going to lose my job. And it's high stakes all the time. It's just kind of like, what if the stakes were lower and actually you could just live like a cat on the side of the road? He doesn't have a job, he's having a great time. Not that that's relevant. You both spoken about kind of fragmentation and the kind of the disparate nature of both jobs and communities now, and I'm wondering how much that impacts the way that you guys work. Like, I know that United Voice of the World, particularly the cultural workers, a lot of that is about people being freelance and fragmented and individualized, and I wonder whether you could speak to the impact that has on the way that organizing has to happen, or what you think needs to change in that context.
So that's one of the reasons why I guess it's great to come together. It's because in the creative industries, a lot of us are freelance. So we don't have colleagues, or we work in places where other people are freelance too, and we're kind of pitted against each other. And generally, the world is heading towards a more freelance kind of landscape. So like 1 in 4 workers in the UK are freelance already. And I think there's nothing wrong with being freelance in some ways. The problem is it's being used so employers are not responsible for so little. So you have no employment rights like an employee, and the employer doesn't have to pay for any sort of pension, sick pay, annual leave, anything. If you're discriminated in the workplace, you can't bring your employer to employment tribunal, for example. You could go to civil court, but it's different. And it also, the other problem with freelancing is that it makes us feel like very replaceable. And that's the point I think that the employers are trying to make, is that, oh, you come in for a project, next time we'll have someone else. So you always have to be like the best version of yourself to be re-employed and re-employed. And you don't really have colleagues that you can speak to and like share kind of concerns on like the conditions at work. And let's say when you have COVID, well, you just lose all your money because you just have to give up all your freelance days. So it's a massive problem. And it's true that in terms of trade unions, it's very new, and this is where we look at like what Uber drivers have done, Deliveroo, riders, and I guess one important thing that happens is that even if we don't have colleagues to support us, we have other union members that work in similar workplaces so that they can relate. For me, it was very refreshing to meet other people in fashion, let's say, that were also saying like, it's not okay to finish at 11 in the evening and I'm angry and I want to stand up to my boss. And that makes a big difference to just meet other workers. Then those workers can also support us through because we do casework for freelancers. So it might be different. It could be just basically, sometimes it's just negotiating a contract, your freelance contract. You don't have to go through employment law necessarily. You could put pressure, like Louis said, by going through threatening of like public shaming, or even just having showing that you have the legal kind of lingo and that you are surrounded by a body of other workers and that you're sending letters on behalf of a union. Everything, it just helps. They're so not used to that like, and so we all write our letters together, like for a fellow freelancer in another, let's say, graphic design studio. And we'll share like advice on what is a better contract or what is a better pay. We'll create also, we're trying to create more resources together. So having terms and conditions that are more fair in our contracts. Like, let's say, if things like, if you do not pay within the 30 days my invoice, you'll get an extra fee, or if there's too many back and forth to change the project, then I will add more fee on my invoice, things like that. I'm trying to think of examples. The other thing that happens, and this is what I think a lot of unions like us are trying to fight for, is worker status. So to prove that basically a lot of us who are freelance are not technically freelance, so that actually you should be protected by employment law, and your employer should be a bit more responsible towards you, that he can't just like clean his hands from any responsibility. And this is something that we go to either to tribunal for, or even if you explain to the employer, you threaten to go to tribunal that you're technically an employee, they could either change your contract, or if you get dismissed and you want to make a claim. Sorry, I'm getting a bit, this is confusing maybe. Basically, what's important to know is that you're not always self-employed, that sometimes because you're always asked to go to the workplace at the same time, or because you do things that is not on your terms, or you have regular work from this employer, that you're a worker, or even more, you're an employee. So this is one of the angles, the pressure points that we have for atomized workers. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's interesting you said really early on like that we don't know our rights and we don't know how things work, and I think it's both a case that like individuals don't know their rights as well, but I think actually there's also like quite a lot of employers don't know what the rules are, and so do things a certain way. And so if you come back and go, actually I think you'll find that's not true, and they go, oh my god, I was really hoping you wouldn't ask me about that because I actually don't know how it works. And yeah, there are so many pressure points about kind of classification and responsibility that where it's obviously it's in the favor of the employer to just like cross their fingers and hope that you, like with landlords, that you like don't read the contract properly and then they can like screw you down the line. But actually if you come back and be like, this is an illegal tenancy agreement, you can't say this, and then suddenly you're like, nah, I bet you didn't even think I could read, but I'm coming for you. Louis, you spoke about kind of community. Oh, sorry, Anna, you were gonna.
No, sorry, I just want to add a tiny thing. It's also good to remember, I think, that it's not just down to what's in the law. It's also sometimes you could pressure for things you just want. it doesn't have to fall under employment law. Like, I want this better condition, and you don't need to stop at employment law. And yeah, that's it.
That's such a good point, actually. I think we're so accustomed to not even having the things that we're entitled to that you can't even imagine what it might look like to have things that are even better than like the bare minimum. Yeah, that's such a good point. Louis, how does kind of fragmentation and that kind of disparate stuff, how does that play into the way that kind of community organising works?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, like I said at the start, really, like it's kind of fundamental to why ACORN has grown, is because that disparate like stuff exists in a lot of like workplaces and communities anyway. You know, I think kind of all of these people that are making these decisions about us in our communities, these powerful people, they kind of rely on us being atomized. They kind of rely on us treating the problems that we run up against as like individual problems that are probably kind of problems that are my fault. Maybe the reason I can't afford my rent is actually because I can't manage my money properly. Maybe the reason is that I'm not being paid enough is because like I'm not skilled enough at my job. And if you accept the narrative that's kind of given to us, that's kind of really like how it is that you feel, right? And it's, you know, it is only when we start to bring people together that we start to realize that actually maybe that narrative that we're fed like isn't actually the way that it is. And we can start to realize that, you know, actually there are systemic problems that are causing these things that happen to us. Kind of aside to that, which I think is really interesting that feeds into it, is unless when we're like the way that we recruit members and the way that we get people to join ACORN is by going door to door in communities and talking to people about like the problems and issues that they're facing. But unless you, as the person knocking on the door, start the conversation around actually kind of something that leads in towards this sort of like politicized element, if you knock on someone's door, you could go into an area where you know, right, or like, you know, the area where you live, and you know that it's got some of the highest child poverty in the country, it's got some of the least percentage of people who make it to university, some really high unemployment, and you knock on people's doors and you say like, what are the big problems in this community? I guarantee you people will say dog shit, parking and litter. And that's because people don't recognize these actual huge problems that are community problems, right? There's a reason that all people that are poor live in similar areas. 100% community problems, but people don't recognize them as such. They recognize them as individual problems. And a huge part of any organizer's work is about getting people to recognize that individual problems are actually collective problems. I think that's the same as whether it's a trade union or a community problem. It's just that in a community, sometimes you have to do a little bit more work to make people like recognize those things that are shared. So kind of the way ACORN is formed is that it has branches that are kind of area specific. So there is, you know, there's like a Bristol branch, which kind of covers the whole city, but that is made up of like smaller branches. So there's like an Eastern branch. We've got a new group at the moment, which is starting in Lockleys. And it's by bringing people together in these like smaller communities that we start to get people to have those conversations about actually what are the shared problems that genuinely affect this community and get them to work on that. And then we'll take that up to like city level, and then occasionally, as well as like the city level, we have a national board as well. But all of that is like fed into on this kind of like progressively like raise and scale as people, you know, kind of move into the organization and what have you.
So in this kind of second part, I'd love for us to talk about sort of the joining process and the kind of getting involved element of unions, because I think there, like we've talked about, there is quite kind of a lack of information about what it means to be a member of a union and what it means to, you know, what's asked of you once you're in a union, how much do you have to be involved and that sort of thing. So I was wondering if each of you could speak to kind of why you joined and what that process of joining and getting involved and organising has been like for you, and how other people might be able to do the same. Anna, can I come to you first?
Yes. How I joined UVW, I think from a personal kind of story, I went through the whole like juggling unpaid internship with like nannying, and then going into being sort of employed by young designers, but then never getting pay. And a sort of, I think it was an accumulation of all my jobs, even not fashion related. Sorry, my phone is making noise. There was always an issue, like always, often around pay, like not getting paid or getting paid late, as if you can afford that. And then the big other one was work hours. So like just being expected to stay super, super late, like being sent on errands at sometimes 10:30 at night, and having to be back the next day at 7 a.m. And feeling kind of unsafe also doing those things. And just, yeah, lunch breaks also at 3, apparently. Like a sort of thing like this. And after a while, I think I got more and more angry. And then I got more and more, I think, involved in community projects and learned more about unions, and went to a few events at Anti-University Festival, which is a sort of like kind of a festival where everyone could basically throw an event. And there was an event that was called "What Can Unions Do for," I think, for graphic designers or something like this. And that's where I learned about this new union branch. So I joined quite early on, which has been very interesting to see how it begins. And since maybe this was 2 years ago, and since we've tried to have a bit more structure, because the problem, I mean, it's great to have no structure and to be very horizontal, which we want to remain, but it also meant that it was maybe not so accessible, because you felt like you had to know all these things without, like you had to know all these functionings. And I think that's also the problem with a lot of these sort of maybe more radical groups, is you feel like you have to learn the code, or and so in an effort to, I guess, be more organized and accessible, we did an AGM. We have now elected roles. We have also a member's handbook. So if you, when you join, you can basically access all these resources that explain more how it works. Also, we use Discord, which has its flaws, but it's better than WhatsApp, because a lot of people were complaining about no boundaries between work and life, and being on huge WhatsApp groups and having everything come into your phone. So there's a Discord which functions like Slack, I think, but you probably all know Discord. I don't know. I didn't before. And then there's different channels. And I think as a member, as a new member, you can get involved into pretty much anything. And people, because I guess the idea is that we are fighting like overwork and burnout and stress, we try not to replicate these in the union, which is hard with voluntary work, because not everyone wants to do a 1-hour meeting Zoom call after a full day of work, or maybe they can't even make the Zoom calls ever because they finish too late. So there's different entry points, I guess. And there's also the idea that you can just create your own group or idea or working group. Like you want to be, I want to look into, I don't know, fair pay guidelines for makeup artists, and then start a working group around that. And then you could just consecrate some of your time on that. I think one thing that we encourage people to join, though, is what we call the Worker Solidarity Network. And so that's where we support each other on workplace issues, because I guess this is where we learn a lot. And this is also we have limited resources, so it is good to be able to lean on each other. Yeah, and in terms of joining fees, so this is something also that we wanted to have a better fee, because especially freelance people or unemployed people, they don't have regular income at all. And the first, like the opening fee is £8, which can be too much for people. So there's a £3, I think also, it's called Solidarity Network, is when you're a student, for example, and you want to join, but the problem with that is that you don't access, I think, employment lawyers. So we're working on having a better pay scale. I'll put the link also in the chat on joining. But yeah, please join. It's not, no one is like hardcore like trade unionists from like 100 years ago. I think we're, yeah, hopefully it's not intimidating.
Yeah, I joined last week and I love all the emails. They just are very like, hey, this is on, you can come if you want. So if anybody wants to also be new, I'm new to it. So
yay, welcome.
join with me. Yes, Louis, same question to you really. Sort of that why I guess you know why it started and what that process is with joining and kind of integrating into the actions and the organising.
Sure, yeah. Firstly, just an aside, at our workplace, we're just about to join UVW as our union, which is exciting for us, and leaving behind Unite and joining a more fighting union, which is great. Yeah, so I mean, a lot of the stuff that Anna just said really rings true as well. Like, you know, so kind of my journey to joining was a bit different because I was one of the first people to set it up. But I suppose kind of, you know, before ACORN, I'd been like an activist in like various capacities. But, you know, I suppose my first lot of activism happened in like Manchester in what was kind of like anarcho organising in like the 2010s or whenever it was. And weirdly, you know, although these were places, like the first time I was coming into places that had like safer spaces policies and like all of these things, like all of this was like language I had like absolute like zero idea about. I felt like I was sat in a room with like a load of people that had like degrees from SOAS, and they were all just like ultra lefting each other out, and like everybody was just one-upping each other on their ultra leftness. And I just had like, you know, I was just there because they advertised a meeting that was really upset about like the climate, or they were maybe really upset about like Vodafone not paying any taxes. And I was like, yeah, I'm pissed off about that too. Like, I want to do something about it. And I go to these meetings, feel really weirdly alienated, might be able to stick around for like long enough to like do an action with them, but ultimately the action wouldn't quite get any results. And I never quite clicked for me where I felt like genuinely part of something. And I was bored of doing these things where I felt excluded, bored of doing these things where we didn't win. And I got lucky really in that like I managed to get a job as a trainee community organizer in 2012, where I kind of learned some of like the basics and kind of got a bit of an understanding of it. And like I said, because I didn't have that academic background, the job actually came with an NVQ in community organizing. So I got to spend a year being employed where I was like paid, you know, like an okay enough wage. And I also got to do some study as well, like alongside it. And so it was after that that me and a friend who was on that same training program with me, our conversations kind of shifted during the year that we were working together from like, is the model we're using right? Do we like it? How would it be different if we were in charge, through to hang on a minute, maybe there is a way for us to actually set up something that is for us. And so we started door knocking Eastern in our local community with this idea of a community union. Like I said, we borrowed the model from ACORN in the States. The guy who set it up, a guy called Wade Rathke, we kind of sent him an email basically and said, hey, we want to set up ACORN in the UK. How do you feel about that? He like Zoomed called with us to check that I suppose we were the right type of mad. Because it's definitely an insane thing to do. Turns out we were, and so we kind of started ACORN that way. And then it's just, like I said, it's kind of at first very, very slowly grown and is now really, really, really big. But in terms of kind of where people are at the moment that join, kind of, you know, you can do as much or as little as you want. If you want to be a member of ACORN, you can go online, again, similar to Anna. I'll put the link in the chat. We ask that people donate an hour's wage per month as their fee, but it's an open box and you can pay whatever you're able to pay. I think the minimum is £3 a month, so if you're unemployed or very low wage, you can pay £3 a month. But the ask is that people pay an hour's wage a month, and that it's kind of like an honesty way of doing like a sliding scale. We don't obviously ask to see people's, you know, like payment slips or anything when they join. I'm sure we do have some wealthier people that are paying £20, £25 a month, but I think the average is probably about £8, £9 a month or something like that anyway. And then in terms of like how we organise, so locally here in Bristol is kind of our largest branch group, so there's probably like the most opportunity for you to do stuff as a volunteer, and really it's kind of up to you what things it is that you want to get involved in. We organise via WhatsApp mostly, so like the WhatsApp groups that I'm currently in at the moment, one of them is like a really simple low-level one, which is like ACORN content sharing. So if we're wanting to push something on social media, the person who's in charge of our social media drops it in there and we can all just like click it and share it. One of the other ones that I'm in is the member defence group. So the member defence group is often for things which are a bit more like urgent and where we need like a large community call out. So a message that might appear in member defence might be, hey, this person who lives at number 24 has I've just received a letter and they're having bailiffs turn up to their house tomorrow. Can you turn up to be stood outside the house so that we can deny bailiffs access to that property? And there's those kind of things. And then we also have like branch meetings there every single month. Kind of our branch meetings, really the kind of things we discuss there are like what might be our like next citywide campaigns, and you can come in and kind of feed into those discussions. And if you feed into those discussions, often those will come with action points. So if we decide to take on a campaign, like at the moment we're discussing between 3 campaigns we might possibly take on in Bristol. One of them is about Bristol City Council using bailiffs to collect council tax. One of them is about air pollution, and there's a third one which I've forgotten as well. But like if you turned up to the meeting, you would be able to be involved in each of those groups. And then we're also a democratic organisation as well. So I think at the September meeting, we'll actually vote on which one of those it is that we're going to take on. If you want to get really involved, then like we also have like elected positions. So ACORN's got staff members, but really like the staff's job is to do the admin and to like let the union like work, and then like volunteers are the people who run things. So like if you turn up to an ACORN branch meeting, there'll be people that's like a chair and a secretary and a social media officer and a few other officers. I forget exactly which ones we have, but all of those are elected positions, and we elect those normally on like an annual basis. So if you're really interested, you can like stand for those positions as well. And then I think I mentioned a little bit before about the structure. So we also have like a national committee. And again, that's voted on by members in Bristol, for instance, would vote if somebody wanted to sit on the national board and make kind of decisions about the way that we operate nationally as well. One of the other things that you can do, which everybody can do, whether you want to join ACORN or not, is on Facebook. And again, I'll put in the link, we have the ACORN Tenant Support Group. And that's just like a place where really like people, although most people in that group, or a large number of that group are ACORN members, provide mutual aid and support to people that have got housing crises. So people might post in there about, hey, I've just received this letter from my landlord. I'm not entirely sure if it's legal or not. Can anybody help me? And there's enough people in that group that have either got genuine legal background or have learned enough from being with ACORN that they might be able to give you some like proper advice on there. And that's like a really like nice first step for people to kind of enter into ACORN as well. I'll do those links now while I'm thinking.
Amazing. Yeah, something that was definitely a big part of like the pandemic response. Like I remember being in the WhatsApp group that was like, here's a big spreadsheet of all of the like people that need medicine picking up or food deliveries and all of that kind of thing. And I think that was something for me as somebody who was quite new to joining, felt really like, oh, I can do that. I can put my name down next to like somebody else and being like, I can go and get some eggs for a lady in fish ponds. Like I can do that. And I think it's those little things that those little entry points of like, I don't know how to do the big thing and I'm scared of the thing over there, but like dot down the road needs a medicine getting from Boots and I can definitely do that. And it's like relearning what local community or kind of community organizing could be, and it feeling less you know, picket line, massive great big thing, like you want to get there, but like it's baby steps sometimes to kind of refamiliarizing yourself with what that narrative might look like for you.
Yeah, definitely. And there's also like, you know, we also do like lots of trainings on that stuff as well, like, you know, kind of if you did, for instance, want to join the member defence group, then we would suggest that you went and did like a training on how that works first. So we regularly run those trainings as well, so that you feel like you're a bit more like skilled up and know how to deal with those situations. Yeah,
definitely. I put some like a thing on our Instagram story earlier asking what people wanted to know about unions, and somebody asked to both unions what you guys think might be the role of unions for young people currently and in the future. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that.
I'm just starting because that's how we've been doing it, but also Louis, if you have a
I was letting you as well because that's how we've been doing it. I can go. Do you want me to go? I can go if you want.
Maybe.
Let's mix it up. Yeah, why not? Yeah. I mean, ACORN will be whatever you want it to be for you, I suppose, as young people. I think, like I said, we're democratically led. If there's a particular cause that you want us to work on, come and get involved and like tell other people in the room you want us to work on it, and there's every chance that we will end up taking it on. I think, you know, the key thing about ACORN's work is that it's always going to do things that affect the most number of people. And so really we're wanting to look for issues that are affecting as many people as possible. So that could be issues that affect young people. It could be issues, hopefully, that affect young and old people as well. They're the stuff that we're always more likely to take on. You have to be over 16 to join the union. That's like our lowest age to join. But equally, like, you can definitely get your parents involved and get them to join as well. I don't know what age group people are at Rising Arts, actually.
Typically, sort of 16 to 30. It's more kind of 18 plus broadly,
right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So, you know, I think one of the reasons why ACORN has had growth so much around housing is because, I mean, I'm under 40 and near enough nobody I know that's my age owns a house. We're all renters. And unless we're lucky enough to have parents that are going to buy us houses, which me and my friends are not, then we're going to be renting for a very, very, very long time. And so ACORN is going to be able to provide us with like some mechanisms for making that renting system fairer. And I think it was touched on a bit by Anna as well earlier. You know, it's that same thing of like, there's two things I think that ACORN does around housing concurrently. One is like helping us to enforce our rights that we currently have, which is really, really, really tricky. And then the other thing is about like trying to extend those rights and privileges as well to something that we actually want, and helping us like create that better world. I think as a union, we probably are fairly young. I think compared to like your traditional trade unions, they probably do have a much older average age. All those kind of elected positions that I spoke about before, I think the vast majority of those will be kind of people that are under 35 and all the rest of it. And obviously we've got people of all ages in our union, but you'll feel very at home at like a meeting here. You wouldn't feel like the weird youngster or anything like that in an ACORN meeting for sure. I'm touching on the older side now, which is weird. That's happened to me over the last few years, but there we go.
Oh, the passage of time. Oh.
You know, it's a terrible thing. Terrible thing. No union sorting that out yet.
Yeah, now there's an idea. Anna, I was wondering whether you had any thoughts to add on that point.
I think so. The question was, what can unions do for young people?
Yeah, what role they can play.
Yeah. Well, I mean, also I'm not sure again what young means, but how I see it is that young people are going to be more affected by the changing landscape in the workplace. They're going to be more affected by I guess like even less regulations, as maybe older generations, they might have to fight more for their rights. And so they definitely need to get organized. Also, I think one thing is in designers and cultural workers, there's a lot of people that are straight out of uni, or that it's their first, they are entering the workforce. I don't consider myself an old worker. I've been in my job 5 years, which is a lot for these days. But I feel like I definitely got stuck into bad habits of not challenging my boss. And I kind of want to tell people to, I guess, not do that, like learn about your rights quite early on, because if you go to uni, at least I don't feel like they tell you about those things. Like I wasn't warned about leaving on time, or about pay, or about lots of other things. So I would say that it's important for young people to get involved and get their friends involved, and learn about their rights and teach others about their rights at work, and not feel disempowered, even though I know finding a job is really hard. But if everyone, I guess, is ready to challenge their boss, then you don't have this culture of like shutting each other up because you're in fear. This is hard to say in like an increasingly more precarious kind of environment. But actually sometimes the law is on our side. And if we do get together, we could build power. I guess we always say that like young people are getting more politicized. So I feel like we count on them also. And yeah, and unions are changing. They're not just like we were saying, these more like very administration top down kind of, you have to be obsessed and passionate about employment law and trade union history. There are more, I guess there's more space for all sorts of actions and concerns. Yeah, I in the union there's also some a few people that are tutors, and I know that they try to bring this to their students. So hopefully there's going to be more young people, but there already are.
Amazing, thank you. I have a couple more questions from those kinds of things, but I'm aware that there's people kind of also that are here and have been listening. So if anybody has been listening that has any questions as well, like please put those in the chat, and we'd love to go through those as well. In the meantime, I've got another question that somebody asked, which was somebody wanted to know what's their favorite action that you have been a part of being part of a union. What's the biggest success or the most fun thing? I suppose, Louis, you talked about the TSB action, but is there anything that comes to mind? You were like the moment where you were like, yeah, this is fucking cool, or like I'm really proud of that. Is there anything that springs to mind?
It's quite a few actually. I think the first time that ACORN got like any national media coverage was one of our early eviction resistances that we did in BS5, and it was a member of the community who was due to be evicted. We got a 24-hour notice of when it was that the bailiffs were going to come. So kind of ACORN members kind of the night before door knocked on the street and said, oh, by the way, like just so you know, your neighbour at number whatever is going to be evicted tomorrow. And so what we're going to do is we're going to form like a human chain outside of this person's house, and we're going to stop the bailiffs from coming and entering the property. And I think the thing that was really inspiring about it was the turnout. The turnout was just absolutely amazing. Like we got, I don't know what percentage of like residents on the street, but them plus other ACORN members from the local community literally covered like the entirety of one side of the street, and all just like linked arms. One of the people on the street had got married like a couple of days beforehand, and they had wedding cake left over, so they kind of came out and like shared like their wedding cake with everybody. Media came and did like some filming. We looked really powerful, we looked really strong. The bailiff kind of came in his car, drove up, got out, had one little look around, clocked something, got back in his car, turned around and drove away. And like, you know, all of us just got like a really like nice big like celebration. Yeah, nice one, Ellie. Yeah, rock right. That was really, really, really powerful. And we've repeated that like quite a number of times since. Like it's a very like regular thing that we do. But yeah, that first one I think like definitely like sits like quite special in me. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, what a feeling. I wasn't even there and I'm excited about it. Oh, what a moment. Anna, does anything come to mind when you think about that?
So this is an interesting point, I guess, because UVW is really known for like amazing picket lines and loads of music and dancing and amazing speeches. And I think as in our branch, we're kind of reevaluating what this direct action means, because it's not that easy for people that are maybe like alone in their workplace, or so we haven't had like a big spectacular strike yet, which is okay. It's different tactics. So yeah, it's also if we want to start thinking creatively of what tactics can look like for I guess workplaces that are less traditional, where you won't have 200 employees that will be able to like form a picket line. Yeah, I think, I don't know, for me wins have just been being able as a freelancer to negotiate better terms, or get reinstated if you've been unfairly dismissed, things like that are a bit more individual for the moment. What was I guess a collective action where a lot of people got together during COVID was we kind of campaigned for a rent freeze in artist studio, which is a bit more it's a different, it's less like it's not like housing, but it did help a lot of people to have these resources of good practice, and a lot of studios I guess also like reacted to it because they didn't want to be badly seen, and yeah, so yeah, maybe wait, we'll come back with a cooler, like more spectacular action in a few, I don't know when.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is the little things though. It's that like an individual, particularly when it's very like person focused and it's been, you know, relationships built for a long time, for someone to come back and be like, oh yeah, thank you for the conversation, I managed to get this. And it's like, that's not like a massive great big party, but it is one person going, and now I don't feel sick when I go to work. And it's like, hey, that's pretty good that somebody doesn't feel like they want to throw up when they go into their workplace. I would count that 100% as a win. Yeah, so it's different scales of stuff, I suppose. Somebody else asked a question, if I can read my own handwriting. What does this say? Oh yeah, someone said, where is your union going next? Do you have a sense of what your next, whether that's a way of working? They talked about is your union going to change at all, or are you working up to something? I mean, the answer might be no, in which case that's fine.
Yeah, maybe the answer to that. So I was for ACORN, the answer is we want to keep on growing. So like I said, like over the last 3 years, ACORN's managed to double its membership every year for the last 3 years. So kind of hopefully like what it's going to do is going to be able to do that again in the next 12 months, which would take us to having 13 100,000 members across the UK, which would like is pretty sizable, and would obviously give us a lot more power to kind of do things. You know, locally, like I said, I've just managed to find it. Like locally, like the next thing we're going to be running big campaigns on around Bristol is either going to be stopping bailiffs coming after council tax, a campaign around getting like cleaner air, or the other campaign that's in the mix is going to be for more public toilets. So that's kind of the thing that we'll be focusing on here locally. I don't know at the moment kind of where we're at on a national strategy stuff. I don't know what that focus is. I know that during the pandemic, ACORN did a lot of work on like organising mutual aid support and those kind of things as well. But yeah, I don't know kind of what we're doing nationally at the moment, but more of the same.
Yeah. Hey, more of the same. It's not a bad
More
thing
of the
when
same's good.
when more of the same is like it's good stuff. Do you know what I mean? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Anna, same question to you.
Probably kind of getting more confident in things that I try to explain, I guess. Yeah, empowering each other more and having one of those spectacular wins and making people like believe that unions, I guess, have a role to play and that their workplaces can be improved and their lives can be improved. Yeah, I think we also noticed like that we wanted to work on retention, so like not members leaving and trying to, I don't know, like reach out to members more, so like do phone banking and checking in with people, because yeah, sometimes when sometimes we are worried to be out of our depth if we grow, but we are very young and sometimes not in enough resources. So yeah.
Consolidating, putting down roots and making sure that people feel like they're part of something.
Yeah, and I think another thing is also links with other sectors and UVW Maine and continuing to like strengthen those relationships. Yeah, so we'll like get together on particular things we want to improve about the union in general. So that's important too.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. That was the last question that I've got from somebody that people are asking on Instagram. I don't know if anybody who's watching wants to put some questions in the chat, but in the meantime, I have found this such like a nourishing conversation, because I think that like Rising's very small. Rising's only been going for, we've been going since sort of officially since sort of mid 2016, and it's the similar thing where it's growing and growing and growing, and there's all of this kind of potential energy where people want to change things, and it's kind of happening in fits and starts, but we're getting more kind of slick and more professional as we're doing it and putting more things in place. And I think you're right, there is that sense of like wanting to hold on to people and make sure that you're growing in a sustainable and nurturing way, so that it's not a sudden explosion that then goes, we weren't ready for that. That's kind of bigger and more attention than we were looking for, and oh no, now it's all a bit scary. So I definitely feel that like more of the same, just keep doing what we're doing, but like doing it in a more healthy and a more kind of considered way at each time, so that when the moment comes for the big spectacular win, or the big moment, the big demonstration, big whatever, everyone's like ready, they've got their rucksacks on and they're like, let's fucking go, because we've been preparing for this for years and the world isn't ready. So yeah, I definitely feel that since this is going to be a resource that's going to be distributed to our community of young creatives and stuff, I just wondered whether there was anything in closing, since we're basically at the end now, whether there was anything that you guys, final remarks, thoughts, whether the flea in your ear has anything further to say.
You're based in Bristol, right? And yes, so we have members in Bristol, if ever you want to connect with them, like with other cultural sector, creative sector workers.
Oh, amazing. Networks, connections, I love that. That's very exciting. I'm definitely gonna follow up on that, because that'd be really great. Louis?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, you know, just join ACORN. There'll be a local branch near you if you're Bristol based. Like I said, that's the biggest and most active, but we've got other branches across the southwest. If you join soon, kind of just some like events we've got coming up really soon. So I mentioned kind of eviction resistance. We're running an eviction resistance training on Tuesday, the 3rd of August at 6 p.m. We're running a full day's community organizer training on Saturday, the 14th of August, which teaches you like the nuts and bolts on like how to build power in your community. And our branch meetings are the first Monday of every month. So there's one next Monday, and then the one on the 6th of September will be the one where you actually get to influence what campaign we take on next in Bristol. So join. If you join, you'll get sent a link to the Facebook, which is where we kind of republicize all those things, and we send it out via email as well. But yeah, we're nothing without members, so join us.
Yeah, nice one. Oh, thank you so much for joining, guys, and thank you to everybody who's here kind of watching as well.